Hello, good evening everybody. Welcome to Art Space Books and Thoughts. Thank you for coming. This evening's event has been organised as part of our current exhibition at Art Space, a group show titled Frozen Lakes. The project revolves around the work of a number of artists who in differing ways address the contemporary conditions under which we encounter images and their means and modes of circulation. So the starting point for this event tonight was an invitation to New York-based curator Ila Levy-Yap to develop a program based around her ongoing dialogue with one of the artists in the exhibition, Charlotte Project. Ila's own practice revolves around writing about and organising projects with artists. She curated the 2011 exhibition Season Short Stories at Sculpture Centre, New York, and in 2012 was a curator for the Lux Biennial of Moving Images in London and Glasgow. She also writes regularly for After All and Moose, and has this year been nominated for the Bernaldi Prize for Curating. And Charlotte Roger is an artist based in Glasgow who has had recent solo exhibitions at Studio Voltaire in London and Transmission in Glasgow. And last year she had a two-person exhibition at Essex Street in New York with Jason Lodes. She's also a member of the collaborative writing group Brown Study and was a founding member of the band Nostrils of Joy. So I'm going to hand over now to Ila and Charlotte, but I'd also like you to also say thank you at this stage to Shannon Michael Kane, who's curator of Printed Matters, art book fairs and fundraising editions, for his involvement in tonight's event. Thank you.
(12/12/2012) CP, this was last night, all night long.
I sine romaner viser Marguerite Yourcenar, at vi har meget at lære af fortiden. Den franske forfatter vakte opsigt, da hun blev valgt ind i det franske akademi og blev det første kvindelige medlem nogensinde. Interviewet med hende er optaget kort før hendes død i 1987.
Bonsoir. Événement historique à l'Académie française, être immortel était jusqu'à ce jour, et depuis 3 siècles et demi, le privilège du sexe masculin, et bien cette tradition de misogynie, bien ancrée depuis Richelieu, est désormais caduque. Une femme, en effet, Marguerite Yourcenar, est élue, à 73 ans, académicienne, au fauteuil de Roger Caillois.
So it was that Marguerite Yourcenar, novelist, poet, essayist and translator, entered into immortality. That night in 1981, the account of her election to the Academy upstaged even the plight of the hostages in Iran on the French television news. But though the French were canonizing her, she's not exclusively theirs. Born in Brussels, she's lived for half her life in the United States. She's told the story of the world's history in novels extending from the memoirs of the Roman Emperor Hadrian to her panorama of the Renaissance in the Abyss, and she's read throughout the world. But what did selection to this exclusive intellectual company mean to her? Nothing?
Nothing. Consider the Academy as an honorable French institution, though they have missed many great men, and the many men that were not so great. After all, you can make a very good Academy, or the people who have refused or never talked about. And so, it doesn't prove they were united with them, all the important writer of France, they never did. It's a very honorable club. They suddenly decide to take a woman. It happened that that woman was me, period. There's nothing more to say.
seriously for a while, finding some climbing videos, getting bored of them, and then feeling I had to excuse myself with header-length emails like, "Did you take away my spare set of keys?" etc. Anyway, last night I couldn't sleep. It was my own fault. I watched too many bouldering competitions online. I was looking for the best repeaters to send you after you requested one. And then I watched an old Marguerite Yourcenar documentary on YouTube that had been gathering dust in an old playlist of mine. Then I decided that I had to reread my dog-eared sections of Yourcenar's book, Memoirs of Hadrian, until 5 a.m. All of these things are, in a certain way, contingent in my mind. Have you come across much of Yourcenar's writing? I think you'd like her books, or at least the idea of her. Your relationship with those YouTube users, Samwith Wolf and Nike Classics, reminds me of Yourcenar's relationship to men. She's a cipher of male homosexuals, albeit historical ones, the Emperor Hadrian, Zeno the philosopher, and the modernist writer Yukio Mishima. Through writing each emerge as versions of herself, she somehow repeats their actions through her own voice and language. Yourcenar had a very particular relationship with her own library. At home, she would order her books according a timeline of the historical setting of each story. I'm intrigued, if not in awe, of this idea that she wasn't interested in conventional classification of books by genre or by alphabetical name, but on a fabricated chronology that took fictional inscription as the basis for reading and also for structure. Maybe in the historical continuum, fiction is agency, a conscious construction. The reality of life has such an inevitable sense of flux and accident. When we scan the bookshelves, we usually move between worlds of people thrown together by the arbitrariness of alphabet. But Yourcenar's books, these worlds converse with one another. Hers is a strange library, one that creates unlikely peers, and she is somehow embedded within this network. As I said, things have been coming together in my mind a little more as last night turned into this morning. Perhaps the answer to this following question is a related tangent. Tell me more about the work that you're going to show at Artist Space, and whether it's changed from the Studio Voltaire version. We spoke about the work only in the briefest terms before, partly because you were so close to the making of, but I wonder if you had more of a sense of its shape by now, or perhaps even a sense of what the work does. Yours affectionately, ILYX.
1912-2012, ILY. The climbing, that music. In the establishing shot of that video, we see the wall, and then we see the decks facing the wall. The DJ will play to the wall. I can't believe they climb to that music. It's like an extra layer of suffering endurance. Mental. Why do they do that? It must be so disconcerting. I don't know other sports where music is imposed upon you so aggressively, apart from aerobics and Zumba. In the video, it's so strange to see that competitors sit down in a row in front of the wall, facing away from the wall so that they can see the action. Instead, they have to watch the audience. Looks a bit shameful, no? I haven't come across much Yourcenar and would love to peruse that library. Do you know some examples of what's side by side? Her name's quite weird, isn't it? It sounds like a username, 2 words joined. Your something. It's an anagram, isn't it? And it's not her given name. I read that she and her father sat down and made it up together from the jumbled letters of their existing surname. Speaking of usernames, Samwith Wolf and Nike Classics, the Homo ciphers, I'll tell you a bit about what I'm doing for the shows at Artist Space. Some of it started with another Homo cipher, John Cage. A friend told me about the performance artist Escher Ferrer and her influence on Cage. Her correspondence inspired him to go in and rework all the gender pronouns in his Misostyc poem, Overpopulation and Art. I'd also been reading Philip Gentry's essays, The Cultural Politics of 4 minutes and 33 seconds, Identity and Sexuality. There's an amazing description of Cage performing 4 minutes and 33 seconds on a street in Harlem. The silence is broken only by a group of teenage boys who question him. I want to see that footage but can't find it anywhere. I was thinking about a particular P section of overpopulation and art when making this work. It made me think of this tension I'm interested in between the material surface and structural film of minimalism and the edgelessness of internet video, which can be experienced everywhere simultaneously. The glass houses, the vastness and intimacy that we've talked about before. For the Cage event, I took an old text I had written and reworked it, taking some stuff away and adding I was playing with this weird tag cloud I found when doing an image search for a generic speaker. In among the hundreds of identical pics of the same speaker in varying resolutions and hues and sizes, there was an incongruous picture of a kung fu suit. I clicked on it and took me to a site where there was this massive list of tags. I enjoyed the flow of them. I went back a few days in a row and the word tags were slowly changing. Now I can't find the site. I really can't understand what it was. Another element I brought into the work is a transcription of an interview from Punking Out, a documentary made in the late 1970s about early days of CCBGs. It has all the rare footage and interviews of seminal rockers of the time, predominantly male of course, with some interviews with punters. Anyway, there was this wee fragment that stayed with me from the documentary. A very short interview with a barmaid in which she describes the effects, which were quite profoundly new to people at the time, of the very loud music. She described how no one else can understand each other there because of the volume, but that her and the other barmaid, called Maureen, had out of necessity evolved to be able to converse with one another perfectly well. There's a wee moment when she falters in her speech saying, "Like I can speak, I can carry on a conversation with Maureen perfectly." For me, this "I can speak, I can hold it" is a thread to the Bernard Stiegler quotation I keep chopping up and reusing. It's about the Paleolithic relationship, language and techniques. This is a juggled, bastardized version of a previous paraphrasing. Here quoting Leo Gorman. "We didn't begin in the brain, but in the feet. It was only when we stood up that the hands and mouth were freed from grasping. So language developed, another prosthesis. Erect posture determines a new system of relations. Freeing of the hand during the locomotion is also that of the face from its grasping functions. The hand will necessarily call for tools, movable organs. The tools of the hand call necessarily for the language of the face. Tools for the hand, language of the face. These are twin poles of the same apparatus." The barmaid also talks about the tinnitus after leaving work each night. She describes how long it lasts for, not in measured time, but in measurement of space. "My ears would ring to 110th Street from like 2nd Street. I like this using the materiality of sensory problem as a way of measuring time and space. I'm sending you the clip now. Paolo Manchin, whose YouTube videos I describe in percussive biface 1 to 13, talks constantly throughout the making of his flint. He is, through a bodily relationship to material, trying to recreate something ancient. Remembering through repetition, simultaneously he's dealing with the memory as in data and file size. He has to break his action down into 13 parts because of its bit rate. I'm currently experimenting with using these very small samples. House vocal samples are simultaneously formal. We obviously experience them as material, repetitive moment, and very emotive, very vocal. This to me is like emoticons I use. Formal staccato nuggets displayed emotion, but formulaic emotion, like in the house samples. Distilled, prescribed emotion. So what I'm showing for Artist Space is percussion biface 1 to 13 and bringing in these new elements that I used in the cage piece. Speaking of trying to fit in material into time and space, must crack on with my tax return. Lots of love, C. Kiss, 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 kiss.
23/12/2012. CP. Online or in person, climbing makes my palms sweat even when I'm sitting down, but maybe I've confused fetish with emotion here. As requested, here is a picture of Yourcenar's library. It's a sketchy, over-nostalgic JPEG I found online. Funny, she has a photograph of a portrait of Hadrian's lover Antinous at eyeline height from the desk. I think that's Hadrian on top. There's a home security motion sensor that separates them. I can't make out what the hairy thing is in the bottom right corner. The spines of the books in this picture, and there's no inventory of her home items online. but imagining my fingers running the length of the wooden shelves, I would think of Memoirs of Hadrian, close to Fabiola, and Book of the Later Han. Yukio Mishima's Beautiful Star could be appropriately stacked with Stanislav Lem's Solaris. What's interesting about Ursenar's disavowal of genre or alphabet is that she seems to admit that the names of things are not necessarily the best ordering principle for a library. The autonomous logic and inner life of narrative is a more correct relationship with one's books. Names are the persona that authors the action as a whole, not necessarily the content. Thinking about these usernames we mentioned, Ursenar, Samothwolf, Nike Classics, Paleo Man Jim, it's all given me a bit of an early 1990s throwback to consider my first email address, my chat room names, bulletin board handles, and so on. On a technical quandary then, at what point did we switch from calling our online identities handles to users? I think this word handle was made common by personal radio broadcasting in the 1970s, those one-way outbound broadcasting systems. This naming terminology was then adopted by early online communities and hackers in the 90s, but we've started to call ourselves users. It sounds much more arm's length, this word. There's no material implication, nothing to grab onto. It's more parasitic, perhaps. Confession. My self-assigned persona when I was young, the name I would only respond to as a 3 or 4-year-old, was Button Handle. I feel weirdly ashamed just looking at the name I just typed out. I don't recall why it even came about. Strange. Thanks for the friend of Maureen. I love your description of her speaking, this kind of inverted confusion, the reduction of speaking, the gestures of speaking, rather than the sound of language itself. She was chewing gum, talking, taking the gum out, speaking, smoking, and telling us about their evolved language. Her voice sounds lower, almost dropped, like a slowed down cassette. On that note, I wondered if you'd read Anne Carson's essay, The Gender of Sound. If not, here's a link. In your email, I was intrigued by this paradox phrase you used, prescribed emotion. What do you mean by that? I was in London at the British Museum yesterday. I think the museum's undergoing some kind of renovation. Everything was crated or else the vitrines were empty. I saw an early technology exhibit. It was a display of the oldest Paleolithic hand axes from Europe. I think you'd like them. It looked odd, these sculptural things being displayed in manuscript cabinets. You know, those type of Victorian wooden cases with a small single panel of glass to see through. It looked like they weren't objects at all, but books on display. It looked like they had no place to go. Yours, Af, ILY.
3rd of Jan. Hi, Button Handle. Greetings from a train on a Hogmanay afternoon, Glasgow to Aberdeen. We'll be hitting the Pebble Dash soon. Here are links to 2 totally unrelated YouTube videos. Lately I've been thinking about them together, not as a way of forcing comparisons or juxtapositions between them, but because they're both videos that I've been compelled to post on Facebook more than once. Just because I love them so much. I've posted each of them separately, not together, 2 or 3 times, a year or so apart. The first is novelist Doris Lessing outside her North London home. The second clip is of the Long Island producer-musician Arab Music playing live.
Reuters. We're photographing you. Have you heard the news?
No.
You've won the Nobel Prize for Literature.
Oh, crap.
How do you feel?
Well, it's been going on now for 30 years. One can get more excited. Thank you very much. Thank you. And the name is down there.
Yep.
Well, a certain professor must have died.
Okay, now what have you got everything? Have you got your... Right.
Well,
I'm sure you'd like some uplifting remarks of some kind.
There are other people here, so any kind of remarks. Just tell me what this prize means to you.
Well, it's been going, as I say, for 30 years. One can get more excited than one gets, you know.
But this is a recognition of your life's work.
Yes.
right? Which is different than I know some other prizes, like the Booker has come in for some criticism for being
Which one?
The Booker for being some sort of a horse race, whereas the Nobel Prize for literature recognizes a life's work.
Well,
So-
there you go. You see, you're saying it all for me. Congratulations. I want to get on to the payment.
Of course.
Okay.
Is there any chance you could talk to the World at One on Radio 4 in 5 minutes?
Well, I'm trying to think of something very suitable to say. What do you think I should say? Look, you tell me what to say and I'll say it. Okay?
I couldn't.
Right. When is the World what?
In 5 minutes on this unit here.
Here, do you want to do it here?
Yes, that's fine. Would you like to go and sit down?
In 5 minutes?
Yes.
I'll ask you just one last question.
What?
Does it mean anything to win a prize? I mean, obviously you don't write books.
I've won all the prizes in Europe. Every bloody one. So I'm delighted to win them all. It's a sort of a whole lot, okay? It's a royal flush. Okay.
DL vid. I really enjoy the swoosh of the Reuters when it cuts to the familiar rumbling engine of a black cat. One of the things that draws me to this video relates to your description of Yourcener's library, about names and persona and the inner life of books. DL is in this clip, isn't being her thing, what we know her for, the writing. Here she's being a person in the world. They need her to perform. The thing that they are actually here about, her writing, is not there in that moment. It happens privately in people's minds at each person's individual reading speeds, in many places simultaneously. She's not known for speaking, but for writing. But when the writing can't be there in this clip, so they present her instead, her body and her house and her son and his arm and her groceries and her mode of transport and their hands helping her and her responses. We don't see any of them in their entirety. This group of male journalists fussing around DL. They're all dismembered parts of and dismembered voices. We don't see her in the entirety either because the writing isn't there. I enjoy her parting words with a dismissive waft of the hand. It's a royal flush. In the Arab music clip, he's being what he is, doing what he does, but more so. He's there to be watched. So the music he's making there is more mental, much, much more than his recordings. Because he knows that he will be watched with his hands, in real time, making the sounds from other places and times, samples. With the DL clip, it's all, look what you've achieved because of the things that you write in your home, and we've read in our homes. And then tell us what you have to say. And with the AM clip, it's all, we know the things that you make in your studio, and we listen to them in our homes. Now we've come here and we want to see you make them here in front of us. But much more harder and faster. Because watching you make the music you play normally in your studio looks quite boring and will take too long. Yosna has a good handle reading about her online. I thought it was interesting that her father, the Bloodline Cipher, collaborated with her, creating the anagram of his surname for her. A twist of letters that would sever the bloodline. Yours, Sina.
11 Jan, CP. Hope you had a good New Year's in Aberdeen. Mine was so restful I'm considering going into retirement, particularly after spending so much time at home in Edinburgh. Having managed to do everything I could possibly want to do in Edinburgh in about 45 minutes, I decided to spend the rest of the week walking around bits of the city I don't know that well, or embarrassingly have never visited. There's a community grassland area around Blackford Quarry that I managed to mostly slide down given how muddy the banks were. At the bottom, I came across a giant rocky outcrop made from andesite lava. The chalk marks dusted along the ridges are evidence that climbers have been using it for bouldering. I read somewhere that the rock's crazy striations are attributed to the effects of passage of glacier ice. This means something very significant about Scotland plus Ice Age, but the geological essays had a technical language I couldn't understand. I wanted to find pictures of this rock online, and so I searched for its name, Agassiz Rock. Turns out Agassiz, the guy who found it, named plenty of rocks after him all around the world, though mostly, as you can see, in North America. They're all called Agassiz Rock. His tendency to name them again and again feels in some way romantic. It's similar to Hannelina's parents' dog, who's called Sophus. After Sophus dies, they get another dog, same breed, same colour, and call it Sophus. Sophus never dies, in fact. With Sophus and Agassiz, I like this irrational love of continuity. I did finally find some pictures of the Edinburgh version, but only ones with climbers' beta grids overlaying the image. In your YouTube videos, I like that you show different versions of what we might call Doris Lessing or Arab music. I was particularly struck by the journalist's pressure on DL to be decent, as if by being a private individual, she would not be doing the right thing. In fact, she would be indecent. She does not fit. Neither does her son's statement, someone must have died. I wonder if this problem of indecency seems to pervade not just the DL video, but also more generally watching a lot of video in public. It's not just the resolution that's unfit for public consumption, but the content. It's somehow always embarrassing. The opposite of this indecency would be Arab music, however, who is virtuosic. So I've been mulling over whether or not to send you a rather different type of music video for actually some months now. I find it difficult because it's a video where the lyrics and the actions are so loaded, perhaps they obscure my interest. I find it difficult just to watch alone, but there is something completely absorbing about this recording, the way the VHS tape responds to the content of the song in a deeply emotional way. And then this next song on the tape cannot help but jar some kind of comment. Anyway, here it is. This is a live performance in front of a crowd at the Oxford Roadshow. The recording was made on a videotape, recorded off the television by a fan, and then uploaded to YouTube.
Shopping last Saturday. I was getting some gear and this guy offered to pay. Who's the hunk? I think to myself. For so many years I've been left on the shelf. An old boiler. Then we went walking back down the high street and I felt really proud because he looked so neat. He was a real hard man, you know, tough as they come. He said I was cool, but I still felt like an old boiler. He bid me come out. How how could I say no? He said, meet me at 8. Come round my place, you know. My new gear on and a blow-dried hairdo. But in my mind I knew I was still an old boiler. We danced all night long to a nice steady beat, but my hair went to breeze in the terrible heat. My mascara ran, so did my tights, and burning in my sight, I must be an old boiler. So we came out this club, hot and sweaty, because we'd been dancing all night. So he says to me, well babe, what are you doing then? Well, I think I might get a cab. I said casually, oh no, come back to my place. I only live just round the corner, you can go home in the morning, yeah? Well, I don't think so, I mean, I've only known you a day, it's a bit soon, innit? Give me a ring sometime, yeah? Then he starts to get mad. Listen here, girl. I bought that gear you got on. I paid you in here tonight. I bought you all in drinks. You want to go home, I should, bleeding cocoa. Then he stormed off. Well, I felt alright, Mum. You would, wouldn't you? So I run after him, walked him up. There we are, walking down the street about 100 miles per hour, you know, arm in arm. No talking. The atmosphere could have cut with a knife. There's no one about. Nothing to take your mind off it, no cars. Not even the occasional stray animal. And it was cold. The wind was whistling through the trees, blowing newspapers against my legs, so I tripped as I tried to keep up with him. And there's all these little alleyways and railway bridges, all stink of piss. And all of a sudden, he grabs hold of my arm, and he starts to drag me up one of these alleyways. And he starts to hit me really hard across the face, you know. He was hitting me and grabbing at me. There was nothing I could do because it was so big. Getting me, it wasn't. Tearing at my clothes, and there was nothing I could do, and I was helpless. And then he tried to rape me. There was nothing I could do on it. All I could do was scream. No! No!
During the recording and the playback of this event, it feels like the tape materially exhibits an emotional response. There's a sympathetic relationship between the content it perceives and the form it delivers. The singer is Rhoda Dakar. She's performing her track, The Boiler, immediately prior to a headline gig by The Specials, with whom she also sings. Besides its emotional content, I was actually struck by three things. That this is a pop song that transcends its own form, performed in front of an audience compelled to respond to its environment, and concludes with the shock of video as it is forced to splice together different events and contexts. Yours most affectionately, I.L.Y.
24th of Jan, I.L.Y. I was at work DJing last night. It was crowded, the music was very loud, and with speaking voices mingled in, it's hell volume in that room. During my shift, there were two girls near me. They stood facing each other, one with the pair of those white iPod and headphones shared between them, an earbud each. They were dancing quite slowly with each other, to their own music, in their own bubble, with this cacophony going on around them the whole while. I loved it. See, kiss. 25th of Jan, button handle. For the past few years, I've had a habit of naming my external hard drives after writers and songwriters. Older and mainly queer, who I feel want to have in my daily working orbit. So far there has been Iris, Doris, Joni, and Samuel, Delaney, not Beckett. Iris died though, I dropped her. She was a 500 gig and she wasn't backed up. I took her to data busters, but they said the data was mangled and unrecoverable. I subsequently bought a memory stick, which I also named Iris. I couldn't quite let her be gone, a bit like Sophus the dog. The original Iris was my main hard drive for the past year, which has been the most productive year of me in terms of work. Since losing all that data, I've been winging it by asking people to send back preview files I send them, going through my sent emails, scouring the Dropbox, and trawling through old, unavailable uSender records. Many things I got back, or found duplicates, or coupled together new versions, re-edits, or more compressed versions without layers. Around the time that Iris died, I also discovered that Soho Film Labs lost the image and sound negatives for 2 of my 16mm films. Speaking of obsolescence and clinging onto things, I used to be involved with 2 boombox collector forums, Stereo to Go and Boomboxery, because I was buying boomboxes for my work. The ones I was buying are 1983 boomboxes, collector's items and relatively rare. I am, like I guess many people are, a version of myself on these forums. I have an anonymous username and I sign off as Charlie. I know that as a female, I'll likely be patronised in an environment like that, and therefore probably pay more, or perhaps potential sales will be less upfront about condition and potential faults in an item. If as a newbie you go to one of those forums and ask straight up, how much should I expect to pay for a GF767? It's virtually impossible to pin anyone down to a concrete answer. The value of these objects is so mercurial. People will answer things like, depends really, could be $450, could be $750, whatever you feel it's worth. Then that's how much it will be, make me an offer. In a way, this slippery volume system can be infuriating and feel disempowering. But in another way, it's amazing. There's a lot of trading that goes on in the forums. There is more trust than on eBay. There has to be. In seeking out a Sharp GF777 to use at a show in Essex Street, I was in dialogue with a user called Bad Boy Bill, who in order to demonstrate the perfect working condition of the machine, he made me a video in his kitchen in Illinois, in which he roved the camera slowly across each of its surfaces and addressed me directly, demonstrating the working order of each of its features. Another user in Queen sent me pictures of him stripping down the machine and cleaning its mechanisms in the bathtub. Boomboxery is a very draconian forum with a mathematical formula that you have to solve before being allowed to join. Users refer with some disdain to lurkers. Lurkers are novices who joined the forum some time ago but have not posted. There is also quite a disdainful attitude from users towards eBay. Someone will post, there's a GF777 just gone on eBay for $800. He's taking the piss. To which someone might reply, I reckon it's Love GVC Beast. He's a lurker. I've become less interested in boomboxes these days since I use them less in my work. That interest has been replaced by 1970s and 1980s automatic divers watches for pleasure. Steve and Julia are a couple on eBay who call themselves Timely Classics. They service and sell these watches. On their sellers page, they have a picture of their children. I'm very seduced by the images of watches they post. My watch list is full of them. Timely Classics keeps apologising for the quality of the photographs in the company detailed description, but they look impeccable to me. Each watch is the same position in every shot. I made a Facebook album of my watch list last night and only realised upon posting it, when the images could be viewed in grid formation, that the time on every watch was somewhere between 10:05 and 10:10, but the dates were different. They'd been posted on eBay months apart. So either their photographer came in one day at 10 a.m, set up a display stand and took 30 seconds to photograph a large batch of watches, placing one after another on the unmoving stand, or she comes in regularly at 10 a.m. C, kiss. 27th of Jan, more soon, for now, this, C, kiss.
27 Jan. CP. I've been looking for pictures of one of those hand axes I saw in the British Museum. It was a blade that was milky yellow in colour and had a Z-twist carved out by its maker. I had to trawl through a few hundred items before I found it. The blade has the year it was found written on its face. The overlaid writing is historical now, so it can't be removed. The online search was new, and so dead links were abundant. My search term, early technology, threw up an unlikely set of things, among them 1970s and 80s wristwatches, so I thought you might like this arrangement. Looking through the list and clicking on the links I could get through to, I gathered that the first waterproof watches were made in the UK. They were called WWW's, waterproof wristlet watches, produced as standard issue for soldiers in World War I. Although different companies made them, because of strict army requirements, the watches barely varied from brand to brand. Like your diver's watches, the front of this soldier's WWW is showing the time as 10:08. I read somewhere that the traditional time to set watches to during photography is 10:10, because in analog watches it is the best way to present the text aspect of the face, i.e. numbers, dates, days, and logos. It also forms a smile as opposed to a grimace. A grimace time would coincidentally be, right now as I type, the exact time in Glasgow, for you, 7:20 p.m. 10:10 has a pleasing symmetry in both digital and analog. Tough luck about your film negs, that sucks. Didn't you used to be a projectionist somewhere in London? There's this trick I was taught to do when I was a projectionist. It was called the lip test. Maybe you know it too? To feed in the celluloid correctly, you need to distinguish between the shiny and matte emulsion sides of the strip, back and front of the image respectively. I'd be in this cramped projection booth, which smelt of bodies, or at least the projectionist who had been previously in there. It would mingle with the smell of that thin pink cleaning fluid they use. We kept getting this one emulsion that was glossy, so we would have to do a lip test. I would take out films and put them between my lips. An imprint of my mouth would only mark the emulsion. Sometimes, before I went to do this test, I would spot the lips of other projectionists on the leader of the reel. I wanted to show you this in a picture, but there are no images of the test online, hardly any mention of it at all. I guess it's just one of those banal, in-the-know things. It was strange to see these lips, very tender. The only thing I can compare it to visually is like when a bird hits the window and leaves a dusty image of themselves. Yours, F-I-L-Y.
6th of Feb, Your Button Handle. I've only read 3 of the 4 Iris Murdoch novels, but what has struck me about each of them is that every protagonist has been male, first person, and the detail of her writing is amazing. So we are in this man, in the first person, occupying him. Also, they seem to blur into each other in mind, that these protagonists of different novels. They share interchangeable elements of a certain voice that runs through them. And in writing these vivid first-person males, she has half inside them and half outside them. They must each be interchangeable versions of herself. I never said thank you for sending that Anne Carson essay. I enjoyed this paragraph and copied it out. It is in large part according to the sounds people make that we judge them sane or insane, male or female, good, evil, trustworthy, depressive, marriageable, moribund, likely or unlikely to make war on us, little better than animals, inspired by God. These judgments happen fast and can be brutal. Aristotle tells us that the high-pitched voices of the female is one evidence of her evil disposition. For creatures who are brave or just, like lions, bulls, roosters, and the human male, have large, deep voices. If you hear a man talking in a gentle or high-pitched voice, you know he is a catamite. The poet Aristophanes put a comic turn on the cliche in his Ekisa Sousa, as the women of Athens are about to infiltrate the Athenian assembly and take over the political process. The feminist leader, Praxagora, reassures her female activists that they have precisely the right kind of voice for this task. Because, as she says, you know that among the young men, the ones who turn out to be terrific talkers are the ones who get fucked a lot. Love C. Kiss, kiss.
11 Feb. CP. Greetings from the flexing wings of a turbulent plane flying over the Oregon Cascades. The peaks are glossy white, but occasionally bisected by a dark geometric line that carves up the snow into blocks. It doesn't show up very well, but I'll send my portable pic along with this email once I arrive in Chicago, and hopefully you'll see what I mean. I can't figure out if it's water, internet cables, or what. Look at the bottom. What the hell is this? I'm just coming back from doing a public recital of Angie's text in YU in Portland. Some woman came up to me the next day and said she'd been at the talk. As we spoke, it took me a while to understand that this woman mistook me, the speaker, for Angie, the writer. Our mistaken identity was compounded by the fact that the preceding Angie event was also voiced by me in a pre-recorded sound file. I was not present. The woman said to me, "It's good to finally see the housing," by which I took her to mean that the house was me and was not present for the first event. As Angie would say, I have become my own metaphor, or maybe I'm Angie's. The turbulence is getting really bad now. I'm currently buried under a compacted pile of small plastic cups, in-flight sized cans of Pepsi, and jumbled PDF printouts trying to assemble my teaching notes for Columbia tomorrow. We're reading the Anne Carson essay. I want to play the students some early vocal recordings, including the BBC newsreader Charlotte Green corpsing live on news, but maybe this is inappropriate. Do you remember this?
American historians have discovered what they think is the earliest recording of the human voice, made on a device which scratched sound waves onto paper blackened by smoke. It was made in 1860, 17 years before Thomas Edison first demonstrated the gramophone, and featured an excerpt from a French song, Au clair de la lune. The award-winning screenwriter Avi Mann has died at the age of 80. He won an Academy Award in 1961 for Judgment at Nuremberg. Avi Mann also won several Emmys, including one in 1973 for a film which featured a police detective called the character on whom a long-running TV series was eventually based.
Sterling is past it.
I love that it played live. I finally sent you that humming video through on Skype. What do you make of it? On reflection, I guess it's more accurate to describe it as two videos. The first is the nature documentary on hummingbirds. The second is overlaid onto the first, and is a research video that records the retinal scan of 20 viewers watching the hummingbird documentary. It's the documentation of their gazes. Each circle in the video signifies a single person's gaze, and the circle grows larger according to the duration of the fixed gaze. Where the intensity of gazes converge, a heat spot appears. This heat spot often causes the color of the hummingbirds to change. Of course, there's plenty of money to be had from scientific research into how one reads an image, but still I appreciate the way that this image appears to be reanimated by our attention. Or maybe not our attention, but we can see the imprint of other people's gazes before us imprinted. We occupy their retinas. Yours, Af, ILY.
Sorry.
Easy.
Finally, the male ass hummingbird decides to eat it in.
Sorry about that.
Finally, the male ass hummingbird decides to eat an insect. and he dove off the perch and caught an insect in a split second. In the film, it takes about 4 seconds for him to leave the perch and catch the insect, but in real time, it is barely an instant. I had never known that hummingbirds were dependent on catching insects to get their protein, so that was something really neat to discover in the making of this film. In many of those countries, we were able to film endemic hummingbirds, hummingbirds that are only found in a very restricted and narrow range. One of the things I was so surprised to find in Ecuador, in one of these high altitude locations, were hummingbirds hopping all over the ground, feeding on tiny little plants. And that was incredibly hard to film because it was really hard to breathe, but also really, really neat to see because I had never heard about it and I don't think very many people have seen it. One of the great things about being a wildlife filmmaker is to be able to spend the time in the field to make a show about an animal like the hummingbird and to present it to the public in a new way. A series like Nature allows you to really explore an animal and get up close and personal with that animal and allow the viewer a really intimate view. And I think it's that intimate view that creates a connection between the viewer and the animal that can really make people care about wildlife.
"19th of Feb. Hi. So this is my last email. See you in NYC. I was at work when I got your email, doing some workshops in the psychiatric unit at the Royal Edinburgh Hospital. We work in an outhouse next to the glass houses. I slipped into one of the glass houses in my downtime to listen to the Charlotte Green clip in privacy on my phone. Totally cracked up. It says on YouTube that the reason she lost it is because someone had just whispered in her ear that sounded like a bee in a jar. I googled corpsing because I didn't know what that meant. An actor says in an interview that it can become pathological in the moment, like a horrible compulsion that you can't stop. So that you're not laughing at the thing that was funny anymore, you're laughing because it's inappropriate. We've all seen outtakes where there is take after take after take of someone corpsing in the same moment every time, and it's pretty infectious on set. This actor said that by the 8th take, no one else is laughing anymore. Actors are fine because of this. There is footage on YouTube of Emma Watson repeatedly creasing up on the set of the latest Harry Potter. She is set off by the sound of her co-star slurping his tea during a take. The takes slip by, more and more wasted celluloid, and up go her fines. We see the director issuing her a red card. I'm writing this in the Mitchell Library. I can hear someone whisper reading to himself on the outside of a bookshelf. It's quite distracting. So, you asked me in the first email what I meant by prescribed emotion in house music, and I've put off answering it until now because I don't fully know. For a while now, I've been thinking about the relationship of words to house music and techno, language and technology, words and minimalism, thrashing out it a bit in my work. I keep rewriting a particular moment from my adolescence, a very formative moment in terms of my own queer evolution. Growing up in Aberdeen, I'd go to clubs and dance to minimalist techno, really stripped down Detroit techno. Everyone wore Hamnet, wore halter necks, middle partings. We took really good E's called snowballs. Totally hetero. But in order to be gay, I went to an old school gay bar with a friend from the old people's home I worked in. The club was very provincial. I had to adjust to the cheesy house. The tracks weren't mixed together, there were lyrics, and we faced each other when we danced. Maybe you know Terry Temelitz, a DJ music producer. He used to DJ in queer deep house clubs in New York in the 80s and writes about the socio-economic history of house music's origins. For him, the context of marginalised of those in New York deep house clubs meant that there was a political and economic dimension to the music being predominantly instrumental and mid-tempo. Because this was at a time when major label distributors started demanding up-tempo vocal tracks. He's suspicious of the current classic house revival, stating there's been a desexualization and re-territorialization of where the music was coming from and how it functioned. In a droll voiceover to one of his tracks, he says, "There must be 100 records with voiceovers asking, what is house? The answer is always some greeting card bullshit about life, love, happiness. House is not universal. House is hyper-specific. Places that conjure specific beats and sounds. House wasn't so much a sound as a situation." I have a 12-inch of Can You Feel It by Mr. Fingers in 1986. The original instrumental is considered one of the first deep house records. In Chicago clubs, it was often mixed with MLK's I Have a Dream speech. In 1988, a remix was made which overlaid the instrumental with spoken word vocals by Chuck Roberts, lifted from a rhythm-controlled track called My House. The speech goes like this. "In the beginning, there was Jack, and Jack had a groove. And from this groove came the groove of all grooves. And while one day, viciously throwing down his box, Jack boldly declared, 'Let there be house,' and house music was born. I am, you see, I am the creator, and this is my house. And in my house, there is only house music. But I'm not so selfish, because when you enter my house, then it becomes our house and our house music. And you see, no one can own house, because house music is universal and language spoken and understood by all. You see, house is a feeling that no one can understand unless you're deep into the vibe of house. House is an uncontrolled desire to jack your body. And as I told you before, this is our house and our house music. And in every house, you understand there is a keeper. And in this house, the keeper is Jack. Now, some of you might wonder, who is Jack? And what does Jack do? Jack is the one who gives us the power to jack our body. Jack is the one who gives us the power to do the snake. Jack is the one who gives us the key to the wiggly worm. Jack is the one who learns how to walk your body. Jack is the one that can bring nations and nations of all jackers together under one house. This speech version of the track was a bootleg and was dismissed by Mr. Fingers, who has always been vocal in his disapproval of sampling the works of other artists without their permission. Regardless, it became the most well-known version of Can You Feel It? Dubstep, meanwhile, splinters off infinitely into its stuttering subgenres. I get very excited about the vocals. Take an a cappella vocal sample. There are thousands online downloadable for this purpose. Then break down the vocal into staccato phonemes. Shuffle them around to resemble new vocal systems and syncopated nonsense. The mouse is chopped up and tied inextricably to computer game blips. The vocal becomes form rather than meaning. It occupies the lurching. Tightly coiled rhythmic thrust rather than just riding along it. Some two-step rhythms sound like you need 4 extra feet to dance to it. Twin poles of the same apparatus. ILY. I still haven't finished this email. I'm now on the plane to New York City. Snowy Scottish peaks below. It's a bonny morning. Your aerial peak of the mountains was very bonny with the geometric pipeline. Is it the internet? Thank you for sending me lots of eyes on hummingbirds Vimeo. I'm sending you this music file in response, because I've been listening to it obsessively since seeing DJ producer Total Freedom, aka Ashland Mines. It's a mixtape by him, feel free to download it. He provides a track list, but if you Google some of the tracks, it just points you back to his mix. If you try to identify any of the tracks in the mix using Shazam app, nothing comes back. He it can't get an acoustic fingerprint because TF has blended, bastardized, and chopped up the tracks so much. So anyway, we've been all around the houses in this mix in terms of genre and texture, and it's all a bit of an emotional roller coaster. Let's play it from 34 minutes in. Here it's ripped the sound from a 2009 YouTube video posted by the rapper Tiana Taylor at home singing the 1905 gospel hymn, His Eyes Is on the Sparrow. You can hear the high frequency distorting on her camcorder mic. Now it's Tuesday morning in NYC and I'm up with jet lag alert. See you this afternoon. C. Kiss.
Woke up and I just like singing, so I'm gonna sing His Eyes on the Sparrow. Hope you guys like it. So here we go. Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart feel lonely? Yeah. And long forever.
love you.
My hands take.
I know how much to love you.